Welcome to Aging Rewired, a new podcast by Senior Planet from AARP, where we explore the intersections of aging and technology through insightful conversations with older adults across our community and experts in the field. I'm your host, Sheila Solomon. Today we have a very special guest for our first episode.
The really interesting questions are, how can we change the way that people age so that we're able to be more successful with it? And how can we make sure technology gives us more advances in that area rather than barriers?
Joining us is Tom Kamber, Executive Director of Senior Planet and Older Adults Technology Services from AARP, also known as OATS. Now let's get into it. Hello, Tom. Can you start by introducing Senior Planet from AARP to listeners who may be unfamiliar with it?
Sure, Sheila, thanks for asking. Senior Planet is a program of OATS. We've been operating it for about almost 15 years now, and we created Senior Planet as a way to bring older adults that were learning technology skills together as a sort of digital community for older people. And today, Senior Planet is the framework that we use when we deliver services and programs directly to older adults around the country. And over 500,000 people are using the program last year.
Now, there is something that you told me about the first time we met, aging with attitude. What's that?
Aging with attitude is a slogan. I guess it's more of a rallying cry that we have been using at Senior Planet for quite a number of years. We were looking for a way to articulate the perspective or the style that a lot of older people are using when they come to Senior Planet. And we noticed that people were coming in with really diverse approaches, diverse backgrounds, and they often were feeling a little challenged to have to moderate that or try to be somebody that they weren't because they were part of a community group. And we said, actually, we don't want you to have to change yourself to be here. We want you to be yourself. Come in here and bring your personality and bring your uniqueness. And somebody blurted out one day, well, that kind of means that we should be here aging with attitude. And we said, that actually is perfect. We're going to make it our tagline. So we put it on all of our materials, aging with attitude. Bring yourself as you are, as an older adult, and don't be defensive. Actually be assertive. Take your space and claim some attention in the world. And we're here to support that.
Now, where did this idea come from to even establish what is now Senior Planet?
Originally, the program began in 2004 when I started OATS in New York City with a group of volunteers that were simply trying to find a way to solve problems where older people were having a hard time learning technology. The web was new. Email was still something that was considered a little unusual for people that hadn't tried it out. And we were trying to come together with some trainings and classes that could help people get online. We then began putting together programs that grew around into senior centers and different initiatives. And we started calling it Senior Planet. We started putting together the training programs and establishing more of a sort of model for building impact and getting people to learn together.
Now, in 2004, I certainly was considered old enough to be a member of AARP. Were you?
I was not. I was at that time around 37 years old, and I had not worked with older adults as a particular demographic before I started volunteering with an older woman here in New York. And she got me excited about what could be accomplished when somebody who's maybe a demographic that is at that time was considered a bit of a newcomer to the technology world might start learning tech, even though they were 60 or 70 or 80 years old. But of course, people asked me, geez, you're only in your 30s. Why are you creating a nonprofit that serves people that are in their 70s? I never really thought about it as a problem. It was just something that I had some passion for. And it really wasn't about me anyways. I'm just a kind of an enabler, I guess, or a helper, an architect of some changes. But I've always designed Senior Planet and OATS work as a collaboration where you sit together with the people that really know what they need, who are the people that are over 60 themselves, and say, what do you want to do? And what's important to you? How can we put together some technology programs? It's a nonprofit, so we can do it with a social purpose and test different approaches and see what works best. So it's been a bit of a long journey. This is my 20th year doing this. It's also something that I have now aged into my own demographic. So I can now take OATS classes. And amusingly, as the technology has advanced, there are new technology skills. I have no idea how to do half this stuff. So I probably do need to go start taking some of my own classes.
You said something about meeting an older woman while you were volunteering, but you did not say what the volunteer event was. May I ask?
Sure. We were working in Lower Manhattan after 9/11 to put together a community development program that would attract people back into that part of the city. You may recall, of course, the attacks were devastating for the buildings, but also for the people who lived in Lower Manhattan, which was not just a commercial community, but also was a residential community and a business community. And so we created a website that was meant to advertise all of the neat things that were happening in Lower Manhattan, that people could come back and go to the restaurants and bars and find places to get new apartments and go to the parks and recreational activities. And I got a phone call from this woman, Pearl Schur, who said, I received a flyer about your web party, your web launch, and I want to go, but I really don't know anything about the web. And I'm almost 80 and I'm not sure that I would really be welcome at something like that. Is it okay if I come? And I was sitting at my desk downtown, and I remember thinking, what do you mean you wouldn't feel welcome? Why would anybody feel excluded from something like this? And so I immediately felt a little defensive. And I said, Pearl, you should come and find me at the event, and I will make sure that you feel welcome. And I'll make sure that anything that may not be clear or might be confusing, I'll help you understand a little bit better. And she showed up that day, and we became friendly. And I invited her to come to my office, and I would give her a tutoring session. And that was how I started my first technology tutoring session on how to access the internet for an older adult. And I worked with Pearl every week for a year. She would come to my office, or I would go to her assisted living. And I learned an enormous amount about what she was doing with the technology and how older adults were living in the city. And ultimately, we became friends and collaborators. And it was through that I decided that OATS would be a good idea to start a nonprofit to help people, not just Pearl, but her neighbors and people all over that we could identify.
When did Senior Planet become a part of AARP?
Senior Planet joined AARP at the end of the pandemic in January of 2021. So we've just crossed 3 years as of 2024. It's been a real accelerator of our growth around the country. We were already trying to find programs and opportunities outside of New York because there's nothing geographically specific about helping older people use technology. And AARP was looking for a partner that would become potentially an affiliate who could help them with a program area that they were interested in. But they didn't want to build all the solutions in-house. They wanted to take a page out of maybe the corporate playbook and find a successful entity that could become almost sort of quasi-merged with them. But of course, in the nonprofit world, we don't have shareholders, or we don't have the ability to sell the companies or merge in the same way that a corporation would in the for-profit world. So we create affiliations, and AARP has 4 nonprofit affiliates around the country that help them achieve their mission or support older adults. And OATS was really fortunate to be chosen as the 4th one. So we're now part of their network, and they allow us to use their state offices as a channel to growing our impact and reaching more people. They provide us with some funding. They also help us with a lot of the services that we don't have to do in-house anymore, so that we can focus on having world-class programs and making sure that we serve more people every year.
And now you're launching this podcast.
We are.
Why?
One of the things that we've learned as we've been helping people with technology is that the technology itself is just a means to an end. A person will come in and say, I want to learn how to use my phone, or I want to figure out how to get online bank account set up. But what you're really talking about is improving your life as an older person and trying to do something different. And so all of our programs have kind of implied some sort of outcome, some sort of result. And with the podcast, we've noticed that a lot of people that work with Senior Planet have something to say. They have some really incredible stories. And they're also very eager to increase the visibility of older people in America. the most common thing that I hear when I talk to older folks who come to Senior Planet and I say, what's going on that you'd like to change about the way that we're all aging? Very commonly will say, well, I feel invisible. I'll be in line at the grocery store and the person asking for the next person to take their order, they'll look right over my head and take the person behind me as if I'm not standing right in front of them. So we became aware of this issue of getting more attention and more visibility to older adults themselves, and particularly through the stories and through the voices and the communication about the complexity and the nuance and the excitement of what's going on in the world of seniors. And so we decided to try to create a podcast. One, because we know that people have great things to say. And two, because we want to make sure that we can help magnify and amplify those voices so that others can hear them. It's not just somebody doing a recording in their living room, but we've got a national network of people that do listen to our content. And we think that we can help people distribute those messages and that information.
Any chance that you might also teach older adults to do their own podcasts?
Yes, we are actively working on that. In fact, we're setting up centers around the country that can function as a flagship location in each area that we build one. So there's one in New York City. There's another one in Denver, Colorado. We just launched one in Miami. And we are going to be teaching sessions for people to help them learn the technology and some of the organizational requirements to get a podcast going. So our vision is that this is just the first podcast of hopefully quite a few that will be inspired by the conversations we're having.
So I'm wondering about how you feel about aging yourself.
I'm an aging optimist. I am enjoying my progression through the years. I'm 57 today. I think 57 is you feel like you're in the prime of life. I feel like I'm doing pretty well and moving forward in my life, but I also have spent enough time around older people that I'm aware that for many folks, their best years are their later ones. They have real joy and real introspection and some real quality of life that they may find that's different in their late years, people in their 70s and 80s, that they didn't have when they were in their 20s. And as much as I look back on my younger years and think, oh boy, that was fun that I got to be part of a bicycle racing team or go hike in the Peruvian mountains or something. I just read a book by a woman in her 80s called In the Country of Old. And it's about this notion of the older phase of our lives with kind of open eyes and exploring the dynamics of being in your later decades with a kind of curiosity and an acceptance, but also a desire to make something of it as it is. And so I really am looking forward to being 67 and 77 and 87 and God willing 97. I'm an optimist about it. I think those years may well be some of the best years of my life.
If you're interested in exploring all that Senior Planet from AARP has to offer, you can find us online at www.seniorplanet.org. The Senior Planet website offers a variety of free virtual programs each week, from technology lectures to exercise sessions, discussion groups, and special events. Can't make it to a live class? On-demand programs and tech tip videos let you learn on your schedule. On seniorplanet.org, you can also find original and engaging articles for older adult readers on topics like finance, health, entertainment, and relationships. Looking to meet new friends with common interests? Explore Senior Planet Community, our ad-free social platform exclusive to older adults. This safe digital space is a place for you to join interest groups, start conversations, and make connections. Still have questions about Senior Planet? Call our free hotline at 888-713-3495, Monday through Friday between 9 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern. Find out about upcoming programs and receive free tech help from our team of patient, helpful agents. Learn how to use Zoom, set up an email account, and more. That hotline number is 888-713-3495. Now let's get back to the episode. OATS focuses a lot, as you've told us, on teaching technology to older adults. But you've also been telling us that it's part of the mission, your mission, to change the narratives around aging. At least that's how I interpret what I'm hearing from you.
That's correct.
And you see those two missions intersecting.
I do. I think what we're finding is the sort of entryway into a lot of these topics is this simple, practical reality that a lot of older people are late adopters of technology or have struggles with it that may be more pronounced than the younger generation. But as we start to work in the area, I've also really learned a lot about how aging is problematic in American society and in the environment where we work. It's so shocking to me to hear the kind of ageist and biased messages and perspectives that people bring. I'm just surprised that it's still as prevalent as it is, that people are comfortable believing and then saying publicly things that make it clear that they think that there's something wrong with being old. I really have a problem with that. And it's uncovered when we address technology, because when you start teaching classes to older people, they are learning, which is challenging the stereotype already. You know, what is a very common stereotypical saying that people say is, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And that's something I remember hearing when I was a kid all the time, and I still hear it sometimes. And the reality is that in Senior Planet, 580,000 people came to our sessions last year to take classes where they learned new tricks. And so we're automatically, just by existing and doing what we do, we are already challenging those stereotypes. And if we do it more loudly and we do it on a broader scale, we disrupt some of those biases and some of those limitations. And I think it's also, in a way, it also helps people understand any kind of struggle for justice or fairness has implications for everybody, not just the people that you're working with. So we're all able to imagine being old, even if we're not there yet. And the idea that we can help promote a more equitable and a better place for people to have those opportunities, regardless of age, allows us to argue that this is something that should give us hope for everybody. And the technology revolution, of course, is just a real good universal way to start asking those questions. It's a really good place to be exploring that issue.
So along with talking a little more about technology as we go along podcast to podcast, we might also be talking about some of these topics.
I think these topics are the most interesting ones to talk about. The reality is, we can all talk about, whether somebody can get a smart home device to get their refrigerator to turn on when they're on vacation or something like that. But the really interesting questions are, how can we change the way that people age so that we're able to be more successful with it? And how can we make sure technology gives us more advances in that area rather than barriers? I think that what's really exciting here is that, we've added all of these years to the human lifespan just in the last century. I mean, it's really profound to think about the notion that when you were 55 years old back in 1900, you were very close to the end of your expected lifespan. And today, the average person who hits 55 is going to live into their 80s. So we've created a kind of landscape for the lifespan of human beings that has added all of this terrain, but we haven't built the social structures, the educational opportunities, the financial opportunities for people to match up to the lifespan. And so where we are right now is we're kind of at the dawn of that building process, and we're still learning how to do it. Some places it's gone pretty well. We've certainly got a lot of new fitness and health programs out there, and we've got travel. People are taking cruises and traveling around the world. That's happening. But a lot of older people are still feeling like they want more educational opportunities. And about 2 out of 5 older adults is socially isolated. So we've got a lot of work to do before we build a healthy aging society. And I feel like we're at the sort of doorstep of that in the work we're doing at Senior Planet with a podcast. And I think as we start asking these questions about aging, I'm hoping the podcast is going to give people a chance to create a vision for what's possible here and open up some new ideas that we can start exploring and experimenting with and see if they fit the potential of what we can all do together.
And I'm excited about this prospect of helping to change the narrative that people younger than those of us who have reached retirement age see in us, because just what you were saying earlier, the old motto, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. We know that here in 2024, that doesn't even look the same as it did in 1994 or 2004, for that matter, technology being one of those reasons. But I'm one of those older people who is often asked why I'm still working. And I think about that sometimes. I dreamed of sitting in a rocking chair on a porch and reading a book for the rest of my days after I stopped working. And then as I was getting close to the point where I was going to stop, or could actually stop if I wanted to, I didn't want to. And I still don't want to. I don't want to work 24 hours a day. I don't even want to work 8 hours a day. But I still want to be doing some work, reaching out to people in ways that I always have, and learning, especially learning. I read something the other day that made me think about the conversation that I knew we'd be having today, and don't know who said it, but the quote is, "Your time is limited. Don't try to age with grace. Age with mischief, audacity, and a good story to tell." I read that and thought, oh my gosh, that's me. I would not have said it that way, but I'm going to going forward. And it's also a lot of people who I know who are even older than I am. I just found that very exciting, knowing that today we'd be having this conversation.
I love that. I was reading something recently, just actually yesterday. Apparently, Burger King is coming out with a new ad series that is focusing on how, for many, many years, they've been the place where they flame broil their burgers. And so they're talking about lighting the flame. They just released some images from the ad campaign of people that look like they're about in their 80s, and they're making out against the car out in front of a Burger King, and they're saying the flame is still going. Now, regardless of how we feel about fast food, the fact that they're letting their ad campaign, their ad team run a little bit creative on some of this stuff allows us to examine how people react to that. And somebody in the comments for the ad campaign said, oh, well, I'm not sure this really challenges ageism because, they're just showing people making out like teenagers. I was surprised because I was going to write back and say, like, when did it become quote unquote like a teenager when people are kissing? Why are you defining something that's mischievous or playful and intimate as something that's only the province of the young? That kind of dynamic where people are trying to kind of limit us or hold us back, to me, one, it's insane that we're having to grapple with this. But on the other hand, it also is something that I think that as we get a little bit older, we have perspective. And I think we can address these problems with a little bit of humor and a little bit of creativity, a little bit of playfulness, and get people to realize that there's probably a different way of looking at this than they've been using so far today.
Sounds as if we might be talking about sex in one of these upcoming podcasts, too, in that case.
I believe that is on the list of topics, yes.
I've heard you say, I believe, that aging is where all the action is at. What do you mean by that?
When I first started working at OATS a bunch of years ago, I remember telling one of my college buddies that I was working on this project with seniors, and he said, oh, isn't that a little depressing? It's people that are in decline and it's social work. And, he was going off to work in some bank or something. I didn't really know what to say, but as I've emerged in my work, I've started spending a lot of time with older people. And, we started our center in Manhattan in 2013. And I used to go to the center and sit in the corner on a bench with my laptop and do some writing, but also quietly observe the classes that were going on and the older people that were coming in and what they were doing. And it always gave me a lot of energy, the passion that people drew in, and they were laughing and they were sharing and they were actually having so much fun in the classes that people were walking by in the sidewalk and looking through the window and then stopping and then coming in through the door and saying, what is this place? What's going on in here? I want to learn more about it. And it was creating all of this momentum and excitement, and it energized me. And I realized that the things that I was observing and the things that we were working on around helping people make new friends, build your friendship network, build your social network, or find a way to be economically productive and start a new business when you're 75 or 80 years old, and how to think about that in a way that's appropriate, or how to get that passion project that you've had, you've had a purpose that you have always felt that your life was about. And now that you're in your 60s or 70s, you're going to make that happen. And you're bringing that to the table, and you're looking to learn some technology skills to make it happen. And I just kind of realized one day, this is where all the action is. This is all the exciting stuff. I don't know what everybody else is doing in their other organizations or companies or places that they're doing things. I'm sure that they're getting something out of it. But boy, I never felt for a day like I was missing out by working in aging. It's quite the contrary. I think that this is some of the most interesting and creative space that anybody can be doing work today. And so I've noticed, of course, that as we've started getting a little bit more successful at OATS, we're getting a lot of phone calls from people coming out of college and grad school and other jobs that they didn't feel fulfilled in. And they want to come do what we're doing because this is something really exciting and really kind of creative and impactful. So I feel very fortunate to be working in this area.
Tom, I want to ask you about some technologies that you're either excited about or intimidated by as you are aging.
I'm excited about technology because I think it forces us to ask what we're really trying to do together. I am amazed at some of the things technology does. I was reading a case study last week about river blindness in Africa, which apparently back in the 1970s was a very common disease that comes from a parasite that resulted in hundreds of thousands of people going blind in tropical areas around the world. And the pharmaceutical company Merck discovered a cure for it from a soil sample that they took out of a golf course in Japan. And they took that soil sample and they discovered some kind of anti-parasitic medicine that they were able to turn into an actual treatment for river blindness. It turned out it wasn't economically particularly helpful, so they produced it for free and distributed it out to different countries. But they've almost eradicated that disease since the 1970s, and they expect to have almost no more cases of river blindness by 2030. And I look at something like that, which is a technology-driven solution that we could never have done in the years before we had access to all of these spectrometers and all the different technology, analytic tools that we have. And there's a million things like that where we can start looking at public health. We can look at transportation efficiency. We can look at design features. AI is providing amazing, powerful solutions to things that we've been trying to solve for hundreds of years that we may break through. Even in the next 10 or 15 years, we could see some real solutions. So the optimism about the human potential is actually magnified, and I'm excited about technology for that reason. But it is intimidating, and you asked about that, and it's intimidating more for me because I'm a pretty sensitive person when things go wrong, and it really bothers me that there's so many elements of technology that are not being deployed well. So it's just a very simple example. We all receive all these, scam phone calls on our cell phones or smartphones every day. You and I remember a time when we were using those rotary phones, and the number of times that you got a phone call from some telemarketer or something was pretty limited. You might, there was a time when we didn't have any of them, and then eventually it became a little bit more commonplace. But now in the age of technology, I get those calls maybe 5 or 10 times a day. I just have to ignore this unknown number coming through my smartphone. And it's bothersome to me that in the an era of technology where we've got so much capacity, we've actually gone backwards in terms of being able to pick up the phone and answer it because we know it's some person who isn't really supposed to be calling us. Or when we look at broadband and we realize that it should be a utility in the sense that it should be something that everybody has, just like electricity and water, but it's not. And it turns out that about 20% of older Americans, minimum, could be as many as 40%, depending on different estimates, don't have wireline broadband at home. So they're not able to stream the same content and do the same things online that the majority of people are doing. And so the inequities of technology are intimidating and frustrating to deal with. And then, of course, the real, some of the bigger things around AI with the deep fakes and the misinformation campaigns have some pretty outsized negative consequences if we can't get our society organized to negotiate and manage that stuff. So there's some real challenges to our civic life. I'm an optimist as a person. I think we will eventually solve them, but I'll tell you there are days when I feel a little intimidated myself.
Podcasting is a technology. Do you think about how it is changing and what that might mean for podcasting itself?
I think the technology of podcasting is becoming more widely available so that people can do it in their home. We can edit some of the quirky background sounds of barking dogs and doorbells going off. I think that makes it a little bit more accessible to a wider variety of people. And I think that there is a maturing audience for people that are listening to podcasts who are now kind of serving as a little bit of a subculture. You see them on the train or out taking their walk or jogging, and they're listening to something of interest to them. And I think that the technology and the audience relationship is evolving quite a lot. I think on some level, the ability to get the right searches and to identify podcasts that we're interested in is actually growing. I'm getting referrals to podcasts that I should be listening to from outside the podcasting world. So I'll be on Instagram and suddenly something will pop up where somebody's linking to a podcast. So I'm actually crossing over from one technology environment into another channel, but there's a lot of that kind of crossover going on and the technology is feeding it. And I think that it's actually creating a more committed and robust universe of audiences for the podcasters as well. So I think it's a technology that's going to be with us for quite a number of years into the future. And I think that the world really is so small. I like sailing. It's one of my hobbies. And I found that there are these solo sailors who are actually doing podcasts from their boats in remote islands of the Pacific. And you can hear them telling stories about crossing in storms and encountering strange animals on the islands that they visit and the stories of the local people that they meet and the islands that they're showing up. And I'm so enriched by being able to follow the stories. And of course, then I'll turn around and I'll send them a message on YouTube or wherever it is that I'm following the content. And they email back. And I feel like I'm talking to somebody that's in Vanuatu and getting this access to their daily life in such a kind of a cool way that it's a combination of getting to see a really high quality media production together with learning how to chat with a new friend. It's really amazing.
Is there anything that you want to highlight that's coming up for Senior Planet?
There's a lot of exciting things happening at Senior Planet the next year or so. We are in the middle of a real expansion into all 50 states with a partnership model. So we've created a framework wherein any local non-commercial entity like a library or a senior center or even a senior housing program can come to our program at OATS and learn our training method. And it takes just a few weeks over, like it's a Zoom version of it. So we'll teach people and then they can deliver Senior Planet programming right on the ground in their community. And so we've got 400 sites around the country that are teaching our curriculum. We give it to them for free. We don't charge the local partners. We know they're already working hard enough to serve their communities. So we make it something that is easy for them to access. And we give them a free license to the curriculum for a year, and then they can continue using it after that just by continuing the program. We're also dealing with a big federal initiative around digital equity to help make sure that all of the states and the federal government are trying to make technology equally accessible for vulnerable populations. They're including veterans and people who don't speak English as their first language, but they're also including seniors as one of the groups that they're reaching out to. So we've been a leading voice working with AARP to promote a kind of age-friendly orientation around digital equity. And then we've got all of our online classes and programs with new technologies. We're teaching on AI now. We're teaching about disaster preparedness, which is really a hot topic, as you can imagine. And we're really trying to track a lot of those new emerging technologies that are kind of introduced every year, but seem so space age at one moment. And then 6 months later, everybody's starting to use it like it's an everyday item. So it's a pretty busy time for us here.
Tom, it's been great catching up with you again.
Thank you, Sheila. It's been great talking to you today. I'm really looking forward to hearing where these podcasts go.
Thank you to all the listeners who answered our call for submissions to the question, what does aging with attitude mean to you? Here are a couple of responses we received ahead of this episode. Jennifer wrote to us and said aging with attitude means aging with grace and letting go of the unnecessary so the necessary can show up. And Ralph told us, I can share my life feelings, good and bad. If you want to share what aging with attitude means to you, head over to seniorplanet.org/podcast, where you can send us an audio note. We'll be including your contributions at the end of future episodes. Thanks for tuning in to Aging Rewired. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe so that you can be notified whenever a new episode is released. You can also help us spread the word about the show by telling others in your community or sharing your thoughts about this episode on social media. That's one of the best ways to bring more voices into the conversation. If you'd like to learn more about Senior Planet's free technology classes, resources, and online community, visit www.seniorplanet.org or call our toll-free hotline at 888-713-3495. Until next time, I'm Sheila Solomon, and this is Aging Rewired.